Trump is now more interesting than ever. I think books and movies will be written about the Trump phenomenon, whether you like him or not. And just in case you don't know who I am, I am definitely not a fan. I have criticized Trump and called him an idiot, a traitor, and so on. I actually like him better this term for reasons that will surprise you. And so I'm not surprised when I see these polls that show that his approval rating is lower than 50%, but way higher than it used to be the first time around. If you don't know me, in October, before the elections, I wrote an article why I hope that Trump wins. And people were shocked knowing how much I dislike and distrust the guy. But if you read the article, there's a reason. I mean, I didn't want 4 more years of whining that they stole my election and 4 more years of turmoil. This guy is an incredible whiner. So anyway, my analysis of Trump's regime, why is it so interesting, is because it's a combination of different things and probably involuntary, but it's interesting how he combined these things. So 4 main things: Putin-style kleptocracy. The Putin regime in Russia is about fundamentally billionaires stealing money. Stalin's terror. Stalin was the dictator of the Soviet Union from the 20s until the 50s. Caligula and Nero were 2 Roman emperors were famous for their madness. And then Mao's Cultural Revolution. Mao was the communist dictator of China from 1949 until 1976, I think. So let's start with Putin-style kleptocracy. That should be self-evident if you look at the government. Trump has a government of billionaires. One of my, I don't want to go on through the whole list, but one of my favorite funny thing is that the chief of the Forest Service is now a former timber industry lobbyist. There are several of these. The first thing he did was to abolish 8 agencies whose job was to control and reveal waste, fraud, and abuses. So now it's not clear who controls waste, fraud, and abuses other than Trump's friend Elon Musk. And then the taxation, his plan, just like the first term, in my opinion, is pretty obvious. He wants to shift the burden of taxation from the super rich to the middle class. The tariffs that everybody's talking about as I'm making this video, it's a tax on the middle class. Most of the tariffs hit cheap Chinese goods. Those are not the goods that the rich buy. Those are the goods that families buy. And without those goods, many families would just go bankrupt because they will not be able to afford them anymore. So it's a wealth transfer from the middle class to oligarchs. And don't trust only people like me. Rand Paul is a Republican. Read what he said, listen what he said about tariffs. But the Republican Party historically has always said this. It's kind of funny that tariffs were the dream of the left, of the socialist. It's a typical socialist thing to do. And the Republicans were in favor of free trade and free markets. And now it's kind of weird that we have to argue with the Republicans about the meaning, the nature of tariffs. Anyway, it's a Putin-style kleptocracy also because, the whole world can see it. Elon Musk conflict of interest is obvious. Twitter, X, is losing money. Tesla sales are collapsing all over the world. The only money that comes into Elon Musk's pockets is really from SpaceX, whose main business is government. SpaceX gets money from NASA and other contracts with the United States government. The United States bans the Chinese electric vehicles, which are fantastic and very cheap. You can buy an electric vehicle in China for about $10,000. But because they are banned in the United States, US consumers don't know, and they're willing to pay the astronomical prices for Tesla. And note the hypocrisy. While the American consumer is paying a tariff on all Chinese goods, Elon Musk makes half of his electric Teslas in China. There's a giant factory in Shanghai. And Donald Trump in person, it's in December 2023, and you can read this delirious post that starts with "Merry Christmas to all, including crooked Joe Biden's only hope, the ranch Jake Smith, the out-of-control lunatic, blah, 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 blah." And then it says electric car lunacy and so on. And he did this many times, but 2 years later, guess what? He pledged to buy Tesla because, of course, Musk supported him. The big difference with Putin is that Trump is bribable, and this is something that foreign governments know very well. And if you just stay within the United States, he was opposed to electric cars. He even wanted to ban electric cars until Musk donated to his campaign. TikTok was, how they call it? Anyway, a threat to national security until this Jeff Yass, whatever his name, donated a lot of money to the Republican Party. And then suddenly we stopped talking about TikTok. I mean, is it or is it not a threat to United States security? Totally disappeared from the discussions. And by the way, if it gets sold, the rumor is that it will be sold to one of Donald Trump's gang, I don't know what to call it, one of his friends. I wrote an article about India called "If China Did It," where I showed all the things that India is doing. And if China did it, it would be a big, big scandal, a big, big thing. But then nobody picks on India. And now that Trump is talking about unfair trade, there will be plenty of reasons to point the finger at India. But guess what? One of Trump's big supporters is from India. Coincidence or not, but guess what? India is not a target as much as, for example, the European Union. And Russian officials clearly luring Trump by repeating the US companies would make billions by re-entering Russia. So and all the billionaires that hang around Trump would make a lot of money. Then, so it's a kleptocracy, and it's probably the most brazen kleptocracy in the history of the United States. Stalin's terror. Now, Stalin his dictatorship worked by terrorizing, purging, and pardoning. And that's what Trump is doing. He's terrorizing, for example, threatening memos sent to FBI officials, firing thousands of officials, and sabotaging, boycotting the law firms who they are attacking. So this is all part of the terror, I notice even most comedians now stay away from making fun of Donald Trump like they did the first time. At the same time, he's been purging the federal government of all the agencies and people that could be anti-Trump, and he pardoned people who committed crimes like the insurrectionists, which sends a very clear message. I mean, if somebody, if a MAGA fan kills let's say, a journalist, you can expect that Trump will pardon the killer. And so that, of course, intimidates. That's the terror. Plus, that's Elon Musk activities, which really reminds me of the Cheka. The Cheka was an agency in Russia that was basically in charge of suppressing dissent. And Trump also fired a lot of generals and admirals who were suspected of not being loyal enough to him, not to the United States. It's interesting. It's an interesting phenomenon that now the threat is not the gulags. Stalin was sending dissidents to the gulags. Now the threat is really the social media. Social media have become as powerful as the threat of gulags and execution in Stalin's times. You can see it with Trump's aides, ministers, they call it secretaries in the United States, senators, representatives. They all live in fear, terror of Trump's wrath, being lynched online by Twitter mobs unleashed by Elon Musk. So read what Beria was under the Soviet Union, and Musk is very similar in the age of social media. And the Musk DOGE is at the center of Trump's purges. I mean, it has saved virtually no money. In fact, it probably spends more money than it saves. But it does get rid of anything that smells hostile to Trump. In fact, at the same time, the Doge is trying to save a few $1 million here and there. Guess what? Trump wants to increase by 12% the biggest waster, the Pentagon. The Pentagon would get $1 trillion. It's interesting that Trump, of all the names he could pick for his social media, he had to pick the name Truth Social. Well, Pravda means truth, and Pravda was the main propaganda organ of the Soviet Union. And so that's on the right is the Pravda hailing Stalin. And you can see Pravda-style propaganda very clearly. Check this one. This is on the White House website. It says Trump ties for highest approval he's ever had. Blah 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 blah. It sounds like, oh wow. And then if you check the numbers, actually the people who approve are fewer than 50%. And job approval at this point for any other president has been higher than what Trump has, except for Trump 1, for the previous time that Trump was president. So this is really Pravda-style propaganda. And the thing, what he did against the law firms is sheer terror. He's terrorizing law firms, not so they will never take up a case against him again. However, to be fair to Stalin, Trump doesn't understand science and doesn't understand art. Stalin looks like an intellectual giant compared with Trump. Stalin was writing essays. He was listening to Shostakovich symphonies, and he was reading Bulgakov novels. Unfortunately, Stalin was doing that mostly to censor them, but still, he knew Shostakovich, he knew Bulgakov, and I don't think Trump can name a living artist or a scientist. Stalin understood the science of his time, like nuclear science and space rockets. That's why the Soviet Union became such a formidable enemy, because Stalin was forcing people to do the technology science that was good to make the Soviet Union great. And instead, Trump, first of all, I think Trump has no clue why the light goes on when you press a switch. He probably has no clue what AI is, artificial intelligence. And he approves technology science based on who is loyal to him. Very different. So, one Putin, two Stalin. Another reference point is Caligula and Nero. They were deranged, immoral, and cynical Roman emperors. Legend says that Caligula appointed as consul his favorite horse. Well, the appointment that Trump made are not much more competent. And Nero, legend says, played the liar while Rome was burning. Well, US stock markets were collapsing, the biggest collapse in I don't know how many decades. And guess what Trump was doing? Trump hits a golf course as the market tanked. That's not necessarily the end of the United States. There's hope in the fact that the Roman Empire, after Caligula and Nero, had three of its best, maybe the three best emperors of its history, and reached the maximum expansion and so on. But right now, we are definitely in the Caligula moment. Fourth reference point is Mao's Cultural Revolution. You see the similarity in chaos. Mao was not particularly intelligent, but he was really good at using chaos and disruption. He was the ultimate disruptor. He launched the Cultural Revolution in 1966 as a crusade against what Trump calls the deep state, the bureaucratic resistance to his self-proclaimed genius. The deep state of China knew that Mao was completely crazy and his policies were wrong. Mao unleashed the Cultural Revolution against these people. And the insurrection of January 2021, if you study history, it's very similar to when, I think it was 1966, what's his name? I don't remember the guy, Kwai Dafu, launched 5,000 Red Guards in Tiananmen Square, chanting slogans against President Liu and the General Secretary Deng. That's when Deng fell in disgrace until Mao died. And note, one of the politicians that were purged by the Red Guards of Mao was Xi Zhongxun. That's Xi Jinping's father, the father of the current president of China, Xi Jinping. Anyway, so the All Red Guards movement sounds a little bit like Musk's DOGE. Unlike Mao, again, Mao looks like an intellectual giant compared with Trump. Trump lacks Mao's skills as a writer and theorist. Mao produced the Red Book, which I don't particularly like, but certainly showed some intellectual skills, and he was known as a poet and calligrapher. Okay, and then Trump reminds me of Hugo Chavez, of course. He was an outsider in Venezuela. In 1992, he tried to stage a coup, but failed. But then he tried again, won the election, became president, and never granted a fair election again. And to this day, Venezuela is run by Chavez, hand-picked successor Maduro. Chavez was anti-globalization, was a protectionist, imposed tariffs, and promised to demolish the old corrupt system, drain the swamp. And then Trump reminds me of Fidel Castro of Cuba, who was famous for his long, rambling speeches. Fidel Castro was able to speak for several hours. Nobody really understood what he was saying. He was rambling and rambling and rambling. And if you went to a Trump rally, that's what he does at the rallies. Then, of course, he must have watched many mafia movies, because the way it behaves is very similar to the way the mafia bosses behave. And of course, we have to mention Mussolini, if nothing else, because Mussolini is the first one who said, "Make America Great Again" in 1929, a message recorded for the Italian immigrants in the United States. So what's the outcome of this thing? Well, is it still the land of the free? Probably not, because too many people are intimidated from dissenting. Rule of law is rapidly going down the tube. I blame the Supreme Court as much as Trump himself. I blame the Republican Party for not standing up. The USA is certainly no longer charismatic. I think if we poll the world right now, probably most people in the world don't have a good opinion of the United States. And most people in the world now see the United States as a banana republic with corruption and a leader who is a clown. And that's if you don't trust my assessment, read the democracy index that ranks countries. United States has been going down and down and down. Now, why I like him better? Because if I look at Trump as a conceptual artist, then it's different. I mean, if Trump is a conceptual artist, then he's a really, really good one. If you're familiar with the punk world, with the Dada phenomenon, those come to conceptual artists like Marina Abramovich, Chris Burden, the guy who asked a friend to shoot him, and that was the artwork titled Shoot. Piero Manzoni, who made the cans that you see in the picture, cans that said a sheet of artist. And so in that sense, Trump belongs to this category. You know, he said that black people are the ones who are racist in South Africa. You know, South Africa was famous for apartheid, and white people still own most of the land of South Africa. And a famous white person from South Africa is his friend Elon Musk. Then Trump comes out saying that black people are the ones racist in South Africa. And of course, it's Ukraine that started the war with Russia, not the other way around. Trump calls Zelensky, not Putin, a dictator. It's the European democracies that suppress free speech, not Putin, his friend Putin, and not his friends in Saudi Arabia, who even killed the Washington Times journalist. And Trump appoints himself a chairman of the John Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, a center that presents classical music, opera, drama, and dance. I would love to ask Trump questions about classical music, opera, drama, and dance to see if he can tell a Beethoven from a Jimi Hendrix. Just he said that the illegal immigrants eating dogs and cats. He claimed that the United States spends $100 million on condoms to Hamas. During the COVID crisis, he said, bleach yourself. He wants to conquer Greenland and Canada. He wants to take over Gaza, remove 2 million Palestinians, and turn the desert into a sort of Las Vegas, which sounds like a parody of the Nazi deportation of Jews during World War II. And then he has all these executive orders calling for example, national strategy to end the use of paper straws. I mean, this is a president who finds the time to ban paper straws. Yes. Okay, so we're back to the age of the dead Kennedys and the Sex Pistols. Even when he raised the fist and shouted "fight" after the assassination attempt, that's conceptual installation, work of art. And the meeting with Zelensky in the White House, televised live. So this is conceptual art. By the way, I don't believe in the conspiracy theory that the assassination attempt was staged, although it is kind of bizarre that the kid was able to climb to a roof, sit on the roof, and nobody saw him. But the moment he shoots the president, he gets shot by the Secret Services. But anyway, I don't believe it was staged. And then more, Gulf of Mexico, now renamed Gulf of America. He ordered to remove the images of the atomic bomb plane because his name is Enola Gay. Get it? Gay. He slapped tariffs on 2 Antarctic islands that only have penguins. He posted the congestion pricing is dead when he did something for New York, and with a picture of himself as a king. And that really reminded me of Alfred Jarry's Ubu Roi, which he doesn't know, but he should read because he would probably recognize himself. Stupid, fat, vulgar, dishonest, greedy, evil. Ubu Roi, Peruvian. So how much should we really worry? Well, we should definitely worry about executive actions to cripple democratic law firms, worry about investigation of democratic actions in general, I mean, the opposition, threats to progressive non-profits, and threat to academic institutions. These are all real things happening as we speak. And we should definitely worry about the deportation of the Venezuelan gang members that happened a few days ago. There was no proof offered that they were gang members. In fact, many family members claim that the tattoos were not tattoos of gangs, were tattoos, in one case, tattoos of a local Christian church. So that's kind of scary because, you know, who's next? They can grab anybody from the street, deport it to Venezuela, to Salvador, and claim he was a member of Venezuelan gang. That's kind of scary. So some people think this is a dry run to see how far they can go with deporting randomly people. He claimed the Venezuelan gang that nobody knows. You can ask anybody who voted for Trump, ask them if they know, if they ever heard of this Venezuela, the very dangerous Venezuela gang. Claimed that it constitutes a foreign nation that is invading US territory. How many of these members of this Venezuela gang have invaded the territory? I suspect many more Israeli immigrants are in this country than gang members of this gang. Anyway, of course, also disturbing is that the arrest and expulsion of foreigners who criticize the Trump government, again, could be a dry run, trying to see how far they can go with that. Remember the priest during the Nazi occupation of Europe, who was eventually executed, and he left behind a note that said, first they came for the Jews and I didn't say anything, then they came from the communists, I didn't say anything, then they came for me, so be careful. And the arguments are ridiculous. Yes, these pro-Palestinian foreign students were engaging in political activities. They had a student visa, they were not supposed to engage in political activities, define political activities, anyway. But there were also pro-Israeli foreign students engaging in political activities. They have not been expelled. So it's pretty obvious that they can pick on anybody. They can find a reason to arrest you and expel you. And so far, this is limited to foreigners with a valid visa. It sounds like they started targeting also people with green cards, which is more serious. Again, it could be a dry run to see, well, can we do the same with, say, naturalized citizens who were not born in the United States? And if yes, then can we do it with just all US citizens? Just grab anybody who criticizes the Trump government and ship him to who knows where. And at the same time, it's amazing. The hypocrisy is incredible. At the same time that they deport a Palestinian for protesting against Israel, they send Vance, the vice president, to tell Greenland that he should secede from Denmark. I imagine if a European tourist comes to California and encourages California to quit the United States, just which, by the way, it's probably a more would find more interest in California than Vance found in Greenland. But imagine what would happen to this European tourist. So anyway, should we worry about him stepping down? Yes, of course. This is a guy who has shown that he wants to be president forever, and Putin showed how that could happen when he stepped down, but he became the prime minister under Medvedev, and he kept running the country, and then he came back. So could Vance be the next president with Vice President Trump, or anyway, Trump running the show until he dies? The thing is that Trump is old enough that doesn't have that long to live. why we should not worry too much. So number one, he's a congenital liar. Well, we know that. Nobody lies like him, um, especially when he's whining. But to be honest, I think we all lie, meaning exaggerate to defend our opinions, and we don't like to be fact-checked, just like him. He gets really, really angry when you fact-check him. And but I noticed that we all do that. And I see him only mostly like just a rambling old man. Just read some of the posts, or again, watch some of his rallies. It's just this is a rambling old man. And then he surrenders a lot, so that's another reason not to worry too much. He's the one who signed the surrender with the Taliban in Afghanistan. Biden did the awful implementation, but Trump is the one who surrendered. And then obviously surrendered North Korea after making a big deal. Now North Korea has a lot more nuclear weapons that it had back then when Trump proposed the destruction never seen before in the history of the world. Guess what? North Korea got what it wanted. Is likely to surrender in Ukraine. Apparently now he wants a nuclear deal with Iran. You know, there was a 2015 nuclear deal designed, signed by Obama, and Trump scrapped it right away in 2017. But now it sounds like he wants the nuclear deal. So again, Iran will get what it wants. And of course, Taiwan is freaking out because this surrender, this endless surrendering. The next step could be surrendering Taiwan to China. And he's also surrendered on the tariffs, as we saw. The moment he realized the backlash, he lowered all the tariffs to, I think, 10%, whatever. But basically, he canceled the tariffs for everybody except China. Good luck with China. So anyway, he tends to surrender. He says a lot of things, but then what he does very often is the opposite. Is an anti-globalist. Is globalization good or bad? I think mostly it was good for the world. Whether it was good for the United States or not, it's hard to tell because you cannot replay the movie. Certainly is not the first one. James Burnham and Pat Buchanan were famous anti-globalists before Trump. So this is not new. Both the right wing and the left wing has always had anti-globalists. Globalization certainly created vulnerabilities. For example, Europeans ended up depending on Russian gas. United States ended up depending on Chinese parts. And now the whole world is infected with Chinese telecom. I don't know if it's really a security threat, but that's the fact. So, so you know, it's an anti-globalist. I'm not too worried because it's not the only one, and there might be reasons to be anti-globalist. He's a socialist, so if you're a socialist, you shouldn't worry too much because Trump is fundamentally a socialist. In fact, he recently claims that he's the one who saved Obamacare. Remember, Obamacare was the socialist thing? Anything socialist in America is considered evil. Well, now he says that he's the one who saved it. He's a protectionist. That's typical of socialist countries. He encourages government intrusion in all aspects of social life. He wants the government to dictate to cities and states what to do. It's a typical socialist. His government decides the winners. He specifically picks, I don't know, Tesla to be a winner. So that's typical of socialist countries. And even the thing that people liked when he sent a check to every family, I believe it was 1,200, can't read it, dollars to every family. That's typical socialist. I mean, giving money away like that. So you know, if you're a socialist, don't worry too much about Trump because he's probably more socialist than you. Is he a Russian asset? Big question. I believe so. I have seen evidence that I call overwhelming that he worked for Russia. Just too much coincidence. But you know, I don't have the smoking gun, and Certainly, the decimation of US values, institutions, and alliances benefits the enemies, not only Russia. And certainly, there are all these reports and books that you can read that that keep talking about it. It could be that we're all wrong, but something still to decide. When he removes the head of national security of the NSA, you really wonder who's going to benefit. Of course, mainly Russia, and then to some extent North Korea, Iran, and China. Is he a Saudi asset? I think so. Like now suddenly started bombing the Houthis, who had never hurt an American. But Saudi Arabia has a big problem with the Houthis. What he is not Hitler yet. I hear too many comparisons. There's a world of difference. Hitler was 49 in 1938. Was even younger when he seized power. But in 38, when he started being deranged, started being expansionist, it was 49. Trump is almost 80. Come on. He is a racist imperialist. He wants Canada and Greenland. Did you notice? Those are white Christian lands. He does not want Afghanistan or Iraq, which are Muslims. He does not want Africa, which is black. So he is a racist imperialist, but that doesn't make him automatically Hitler. More like a clown imitating Hitler. You've seen the movie where Charlie Chaplin makes fun of Hitler? Well, yeah, so he has a passion for crowds. This is the crowd under Trump, the crowd under Obama, and Trump kept claiming that his crowd was the biggest ever. That reminds me more of movies like Sunset Boulevard, where there's an aging star who is nostalgic and deranged. He does have a Napoleon fixation. He dreams of being the next president who expands the United States. These are the presidents who conquered a lot of land in 250 years, and he dreams of having US, Canada, and Greenland all united. That doesn't make him Hitler. Hitler physically invaded with troops, and I don't think that compares. However, I'm more worried about his followers, starting with Elon Musk. And I will not go into details because I have no evidence that he really is a little Hitler, but certainly many of the things that he says make you wonder. And then Steve Bannon, read who Rosenberg was and compare with Steve Bannon. And then all the propaganda apparatus, mostly emanating from Fox News, people like Tucker Carlson, they remind you a lot of Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda chief under Hitler. So again, Musk is particularly dangerous. And these followers worry me because too often hail anything that Trump says as a stroke of genius, even if it has nothing to do with his campaign promises. They elected him to lower inflation and to end wars, and these guys start talking about annexing Greenland and Canada, renaming the Gulf of Mexico, banning pepper straws, establishing blah blah blah, and that's the number of Republicans who think that these things are right. It's just too high. Too many Republicans tend to hail anything he says as great. And part of it is because of Fox News. Watch this. When stock markets were collapsing, Fox News had this article, Trump announces massive payday for America, $5 trillion. And this woman on Fox News was saying the country's gonna boom. So partly it's because of that propaganda on Fox News and other right-wing media. But still, it's disturbing that Trump voters get fooled so easily by whatever new idea it comes up with. I think if you told a Trump voter, should we ban paper straws or should we establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve? No, if you had told him that Biden decided to rename the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, or that Biden decided to ban paper straws, they would probably just, make fun of Biden. He's senile, he lost it. Well, Trump does it, and they try to justify it as a stroke of genius. So that's that. I mean, and they completely forgot. They voted for him for lower inflation, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on social security benefits. They forgot that that's the reason they voted for him. Anyway, is he an economic genius? Who knows? I mean, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Obviously, the stock markets have been crashing all over the world, and worse, the US dollar has been collapsing. Does Trump understand that the US is the biggest exporter of services? Yes, biggest importer of goods like shoes, t-shirts. But the biggest exporter of services, I mean, think of financial transactions, think of internet, Google, Facebook. The future, most people think that the future is not making shoes and t-shirts. The future is in services. So does he understand that the United States is the biggest exporter of services? So his trade wars will hurt that part of the economy. Does he know that the US is the biggest beneficiary of foreign investment? Well, I should already say was the biggest beneficiary of foreign investment, because it is collapsing rapidly as I speak. The United States has been the world's largest recipient of foreign direct investment since 2006. I'm afraid that right now a lot of money is flowing to Europe. Check the value of the dollar compared with the euro. Euro is skyrocketing, dollar is collapsing. And does he understand that the national debt of the United States is funded by foreign countries? Foreign countries hold $8.5 trillion of United States Treasury securities. If they dump this money, if they stop buying US debt, who's going to pay for the debt of the United States? Does he understand all of this? And in general, does he understand, and do his followers understand, that if you stop importing the cheaper and better products made outside the United States, the standards of living in the United States is going to drop? And so you're going to have, like Tesla, you're going to have super expensive, bad cars, while the rest of the world is enjoying great, much cheaper cars. And he wants to bring back manufacturing jobs again. Do Americans really want to work in a factory that makes shoes and t-shirts? I mean, do we really want the jobs of these sweatshops? Anyway, so Trump's regime, Putin kleptocracy, Stalin's terror, Caligula madness, Mao's culture revolution, Fidel Castro rambling talks, Chavez, mafia, and then conceptual artist, Dada, Ubu Roi. So is Trump a gift to China? Talking about geopolitics now, how to make China great again. In 2017, Trump killed the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, that Obama had engineered. That would have created the largest economic alliance in the history of the world. And Trump is weakening the NATO, and Trump is weakening the NATO alliance, is upsetting traditional allies, while China abstained at the United Nations when the US voted with Russia in 2025. So when Trump killed the TPP, China immediately launched its own program, project for a big trading area. So Trump was a gift to China. And now is hurting the NATO alliance. At the same time, look at China. United States votes with Russia at the United Nations. China, very smart, abstained. Who is closer to Europe now, the US or China? So China launched this regional comprehensive economic partnership, expanded BRICS, which now accounts for a third of global economic growth and half of the world's population. Okay, China killed alliances and China expanded them. In 2021, one of the first things that Trump did was kill US aid. It's difficult to explain to Trump that US aid is national security, not just charity. Meanwhile, China operates through the Belt and Road Initiative in many, many countries, developing roads, railroads, and all sorts of factories. In 2017, China launched a national plan for artificial intelligence. In 2017, Trump launched a project to build a wall. And so today, what we have, look at the bottom of this slide, is China has some of the best AI in the world, for example, DeepSeek, and Trump has what? The wall. In 2017, the Trump government cracked down on a Chinese company called ZTE and decided ZTE cannot get chips from the United States anymore. There was China's Sputnik moment. China decided we have to get rid of dependence on the United States. Until that day, China was very happy to let the United States do all the research and development and simply buy advanced chips. I have written at length about this. Since that day, China has decided we do our own research and we build our own chips and so on. So Trump caused China to become great. Recently, after Trump became president and launched all these trade wars and hostility towards Europe and so on, she has been silent. I think he is sensing a strategic opportunity for China to pick up the pieces of what Trump breaks. She is portraying China as a champion of free trade and a supporter of international institutions. Donald Trump means chaos, tariffs, isolationism. China, stability, free trade, and global cooperation. Now, do not underestimate China, which I think right now Trump is doing. In the past, I was saying do not overestimate China, but now Trump is underestimating China. China is the biggest trading partner for about 2/3 of the world countries. Look how it expanded from 2000 to 2020. China is the third largest partner for EU exports and the largest partner for EU imports. Do not underestimate China. And thank you, Elon Musk, for shutting down agencies that China has resented for decades. Voice of America, Radio Free Asia. Why would Musk do that? Their job was to counter China's propaganda. Oh, sorry, DOGE is run by Musk, and Musk is a good friend of China's President Xi Jinping. So that might explain why he's doing China a favor. And I'm sure that she loves to hear Trump talking about Greenland. Trump said that Greenland is destiny for the United States. Well, China is saying that Taiwan is destiny for China. And Russia is saying that Ukraine is destiny for Russia. So is this the new axis where the United States will get North America and Russia will get Eastern Europe and China will get Taiwan, and I don't know what next. The axis, if you don't know, in the 30s was Hitler, Mussolini, and Japan united to conquer the world. Now, let me spend a few words on competence, because at this point, the difference in competence is significant. Does competence matter? Well, the United States has to ban Chinese electric vehicles. Why? Because US manufacturers cannot make electric vehicles as cheap and good as the Chinese ones. And it comes from where? Yeah, well, it comes from being unable in Trump 1, 2017, 2020, no, 2000, yeah. unable to catch up with Chinese progress in this field. Think of COVID. Competence did make a difference. Even if you consider that the real China, I mean, China cheated on the numbers, but even if you consider the estimated numbers of deaths, China still had way fewer deaths than the United States. Why? Because from the beginning, the show was run by scientists, whereas United States, you had Trump constantly arguing with scientists like Fauci. So China had Fauci in charge, basically. That's the difference. Had somebody competent in charge. Trump denies climate change, mocks green tech. He calls it Biden's Green New Scam. But then he wants the Ukrainian minerals and Greenland and Canada. Guess why? Because they have the materials crucial for the green tech transformation. I suspect he doesn't even understand why those minerals are so important. They're important for green tech. Does competence matter? Okay, let me tell you how China works briefly. The government picks the important technologies. It's always the government that decide. They decided in 2017 that artificial intelligence was important. They decide. Then the government picks, when the government tells the whole country, this is a technology you have to invest in. And every province and every city is supposed to spawn as many startups as possible in those fields. So then there are hundreds of startups competing in the same field. Only if you survive, the government then helps the winner become international leaders. That's China's version of meritocracy. And China has a big advantage. In the United States, the smartest people work in Silicon Valley or Wall Street, not in government. In China, government jobs are very appealing. They are still considered the best jobs for money, power, and safety, meaning less likely to get ruined overnight. Trump focuses on people who don't have a college degree. Those are the people who got him elected. Well, China has 3,000 colleges and universities, of which 396 are included in US News report of best global universities. And China graduates 12 million students every year. The focus is very different. Trump even hurt universities because just this idea of the retribution, he wants to punish universities with the excuse of saving money. And China does the opposite. Is investing more and more, even if the economy is bad, is investing more and more in research. Guess who's going to win? United States now is even scaring foreign students away. This is so suicidal. 6 Stanford student visas revoked by federal officials all over the country. It's hundreds of cases. This is so suicidal. Almost 50%, almost half of the Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or their children. 100 were founded directly by foreign-born individuals. And just the numbers are incredible. That was the big advantage of the United States, the immigrants, getting students from all over the world, the graduates in the United States, and then start companies. And Trump is scaring foreign students away. They will go somewhere else. Now, we keep criminalizing the Chinese government for subsidizing the Chinese companies. But actually, the subsidies prove which government is competent and which is not. China started subsidizing AI startups in 2017. At that time, Trump didn't even know. I think he never used the word artificial intelligence in 2017. China announced the California-style zero-emission vehicle mandate in 2018. Trump wanted to ban electric vehicles, and he has called California's zero-emission vehicle mandate as some kind of criminal project. And Trump was elected to the rallying cry of drill, baby, drill, oil, while China is investing massively in green tech. Talking about corruption also, keep in mind the United States is more corrupt, not less. There are no special interest lobbyists in Beijing that are paid by rich corporations. Rich corporations take orders from the government, not the other way around. Washington is full of lobbyists, which means corporations tell the government what to do. There's corruption in the United States Supreme Court. I don't want to name names, but you know who I'm talking about, and in Congress. See, you cannot offer something to the president of China. That's the advantage of a dictatorship. He's the dictator, period. You cannot go and offer money for his re-election campaign. But in the United States, you can offer money to senators, representatives, presidential candidates, and influence their strategies. So I'm not saying that the Chinese system is better than a democratic system, but let's just say things as they are. There is more corruption in Washington than in Beijing. Now, the war in Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, was a gift to China, because I made a video and wrote an article where I explained that China is the real winner there. Putin delivered a major opportunity to China to become the leading power in Asia. Trump is now delivering another golden opportunity to China, because China can present itself as the country you can trust. Putin you cannot trust because he will invade you. Trump cannot be trusted because totally chaotic, not to use a worse word. The European Union is the usual mess. Who can you trust? China. What Trump wants to break: NATO, European Union, NAFTA, Taiwan. China is just waiting to pick up the pieces. And China will expand everywhere. Think of Europe. The United States is becoming as unpopular as China throughout the European Union. So at this point, China is the lesser evil. China only has good words for European countries. The United States only has contempt and insults. You know, like when J.D. Vance has insulted Europe so many times. So why not pivot towards China? Why Biden pressured Italy into leaving China's Belt and Road Initiative. Maybe it was a mistake. I think more and more Europeans will start thinking, well, if they are both hostile and the one is actually friendlier, you know, which one should we pick? So China might get a gift in Europe. The only problem for China in Europe is that China supports Russia in Ukraine, and Europe has not forgotten and forgiven that. Now, Americans should really pay attention. China, one of the poorest countries of the world in the 1970s, became the #1 trading nation and #1 manufacturing power in just 50 years. And if you look at the diagram down there, the big improvements in China's standing in the world came under Reagan, Bush, and Trump. Okay, Biden was the only one that went close to beating China's economic growth. And probably if we use the right numbers for China, Biden actually had a few quarters where growth in the United States was higher than China. Otherwise, when Republicans were in power, it was a gift to China. Trump voters think of China as a place that makes cheap shoes for them. Tomorrow, Trump voters will be the one making cheap shoes for the Chinese. That's what Trump's policies really mean. He wants you Americans to become the ones who make shoes, cheap shoes for the Chinese. Sorry for the typo, has a place. And then it's a gift to Islam. We forgot this culture wars with Islam. Any Islamic fundamentalist is very happy to see that the Christian world is at war again. You have the United States, quote unquote, fighting Canada and fighting Latin America and fighting the European Union. and then Russia fighting the European Union, and so on and so on. So I think Islamic fundamentalists are very happy to see the Christian world, the civil war within the Christian world. Trump could also be a gift to Brazil, because all these Latin American countries probably are looking for a new reference point in the Americas, and Brazil is the natural replacement of the United States. Question mark. Question mark also for Europe. Is it a gift to Europe? Well, Trump is definitely scaring scientists and also starving scientists. So with the funding and hiring freezes, program disruptions, censorship, you cannot talk about climate change anymore, diseases. If there's a new disease, who knows, a new epidemic, who knows what he will say. There have been layoffs in all scientific agencies, and lots of conspiracy theories. Well, then scientists have motivation to move to Europe. So there's the prospect of a US brain drain, the opposite of what has been going on for more than a century. In fact, European research institutes are trying to attract US-based researchers. Read this news from the Max Planck Institutes in Germany. They've doubled the number of American scientists. The Europe is definitely more appealing as a reserve currency than it was before. Not because the Eurozone is doing well, but simply because you don't want dollars right now. So the status of the US dollar as the dominant global reserve currency is in doubt, and that will affect Americans badly, severely, because foreigners have purchased trillions of debt, trillions of dollars of debt, as I said. So if you look at the global reserve currencies, right now the dollar is 58% and the euro is 20%. Well, look at this slide again in 1 year and we'll see what happened. It's not a coincidence. European stocks, for the first time in a long time, have been doing better than American stocks. And now we should focus on Germany. Germany has a new chancellor, Merz, and he has said that he wants to invest more in military spending. I think the world was happy that Germany was not spending in arms. Now Germany will start spending in arms. And again, don't underestimate Germany. Look at the GDP of Russia compared with Germany. Russia's GDP is even lower than Italy's and is less than half of Germany. So it's a new world where the threat is no longer communism. The threat is US expansionism and bullying. So Europe is highly motivated to find a common defense. For example, if Trump invades Greenland, how will Europeans defend Greenland? And if he gets Greenland, what does he want next? Sicily, the French Riviera, London, Scotland? So strong motivation to get rid of the United States protection. And I mean, if you look at the numbers, the European Union dwarfs Russia economically. So why Russia can spend more on defense than the EU? Unfortunately, here Vance is right when he calls the European Union pathetic, because the European Union spends a lot on welfare programs. Russia spends half, and the United States spends less, and China spends even less. So, so the EU has a problem to solve, but potentially look at the difference in economic power. A truly united Europe could obliterate the Russian military. So Trump's view of the world is this, Canada is an imperial opportunity. Latin America is the land of illegal immigrants. Europe is costly and democratic. Democratic is not a compliment in Trump's vocabulary. From his point of view, the Arabs are probably members of his axis with Russia. China cannot be beaten with fair means, so we have to find other ways. He insults black countries, and India is not interested because they're not not rich, and by the way, not Christian. How the world views Trump? Well, Canadians are beginning to realize they're more European than American. If I were a Canadian, I would probably want to see if Canada can become part of the European Union. And Europeans clearly are thinking China is not so bad after all. Latin America already knows that China is the future. For Africa, China is the present. India has a strong motivation to make peace with China now. The Arabs, I think, and the Israelis are treating Trump just as a useful idiot. Not Russia, of course, is happy that Trump got elected instead of Kamala Harris, and China will be happy to pick up the pieces of what Trump breaks. Who to blame? Don't blame Trump. Trump is Trump. Everybody knew this. Who you blame for Brexit? Well, you have to blame the English who voted for Brexit. Who do you have to blame for the problems in Europe? Well, you have to blame the voters who voted to preserve the welfare system, the Germans who voted to shut down nuclear plants, and so on. Some of the problems are self-inflicted. In the United States, well, you have to blame the people who voted for Trump. Apparently, the manufacturing and mining working class wants their children to become factory workers and coal miners, which is difficult for me to imagine. The evangelical cults want their children to study the Bible instead of science. So eventually you have to blame the people who voted in Britain, in Europe, and in the United States.